CARICOM heads of government have arrived in St. Lucia for their 40th regular meeting to begin on Wednesday. Brazil's embattled justice minister is answering questions in Congress for his role in the political persecution of former President Lula. Turkey's president has arrived in China for an official state visit. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. CARICOM leaders will discuss their position on the political situation in Venezuela when they meet in St. Lucia on Wednesday for the 40th regular meeting of CARICOM heads of government. CARICOM Secretary General Erwin LaRocque made the announcement at Tuesday's pre-summit media briefing, where he also reaffirmed CARICOM's support for a peaceful resolution in Venezuela.
The principle of non-interference, non-intervention. The issue that there must be dialogue between the opposition and the government. The issue of non-politicization of aid. The issue that there must be a peaceful resolution. The issue of the recognition of the Constitution and the rule of law. All of which are principles up to this day that every single member state, whether they recognize Juan Guaido or not, or they recognize President Maduro or not, adhere to those principles. As distinct from others who are demanding that there be regime change or other avenues. We cannot afford any kind of this thing to escalate into a kind of violent confrontation in Venezuela.
Our correspondent in St. Lucia, Allison Kintish, has more.
The 40th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, will take place in St. Lucia from July 3rd to the 5th. Now, ahead of that meeting, the Secretary General of CARICOM, Erwin LaRocque, has been discussing what the leaders expect on their agenda over those 3 days. Ambassador LaRocque met with members of the regional press on Tuesday. He said the leaders will discuss blacklisting. Now, blacklisting continues to be a sore point for some members of CARICOM who have described as unfair the European Union's publication of uncooperative tax jurisdictions in the region. They say that blacklisting continues to hurt member states of CARICOM. They will also discuss access to concessionary financing for resilience building initiatives. Now, according to Ambassador LaRocque, it is not too difficult to obtain financing and assistance after a disaster, but what he says that the small island developing states of CARICOM need most is access to concessional financing before a disaster. In other words, they need to shore up their defenses and to embark on projects that will help to mitigate the impact of adverse weather and severe weather events. The leaders are also expected to discuss border issues, in particular the Venezuela-Guyana border and the Belize-Guatemala border. They will also discuss crime and security, trade, agriculture, food security, and the CARICOM single market and economy. The leaders will also host 2 special guests. They are the Prime Minister of Norway, Ina Solberg, and also the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. Prime Minister Solberg and the UN head are expected to be part of a special panel on climate change and building the blue economy. The meeting will be chaired by Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Shastney. Mr. Shastney took over the chairmanship of the CARICOM cabinet on July 1st.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has provided a report on the advances made during his recent diplomatic tour of Europe. It was last week when he made official visits to Italy, Austria, Spain, and Portugal, denouncing the negative effects of sanctions imposed against Venezuela. Arreaza said that following a meeting with representatives of Italy, the country is committed to covering the cost of medical treatments for patients who are awaiting treatment but were prevented from accessing this due to the criminal blockade. He also added that Cuba and Turkey will treat Venezuelan patients who are awaiting medical transplants. Among the important visits was the participation of the Venezuelan government at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in Italy.
The government of the United States of America is responsible for a criminal blockade which has affected food and agricultural production in Venezuela. Following an interruption, we said we came to the FAO precisely to denounce these unilateral policies, the coercive unilateral measures which are illegal and arbitrary of that government, and if not the United Nations, then where? We took advantage of being there to solicit from the joint United Nations to the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. We asked of the General Assembly and its President, but also of the Security Council and all of the agencies and organs of the United Nations, we urge them to use their voice to defend the people who are under assault by a form of aggression which could be the preamble to a war of which these sanctions are a part, which affect the life, the peace and the health of the people under attack.
This all comes as Venezuela has agreed to begin normalizing diplomatic relations with Germany, an announcement which was made by the Foreign Ministry on Monday. President Maduro has authorized the German ambassador's return to Venezuela. The agreement to restore diplomatic dialogue channels was reached at a meeting in Berlin. The government has declared the ambassador persona non grata in March after he went to the airport in Caracas to meet opposition figure Juan Guaido. Angola's President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço is in Cuba for a two-day visit to build bilateral relations. Angola and Cuba have been working together for 40 years. The two countries have highlighted their excellent relationship stemming from the fight for Angola's independence from Portugal. At present, at least 800 Cuban health specialists and over 1,000 educators are working in Angola. And during his visit, President Gonçalves de Lourenço awarded Army General Raul Castro, Cuban President Diaz-Canel, and 3 other heads of the military with the Order of Agostinho Neto. Meanwhile, President Lourenço himself was decorated with the José Martí National Order for his heroic participation in the struggle for anti-colonial liberation and military operations in Angola. On Monday, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador celebrated 1 year since his victory at the polls. At a mass rally in Mexico City, he provided a report on his government's achievements thus far.
It's been 7 months since Andrés Manuel López Obrador took office, and 1 year since he won the presidential race. Speaking to a large crowd in the iconic Zócalo Square, he said he has already kept 78 out of 100 promises he made in the same square on the 1st of December of 2018.
By the end of this year, we will have finished weeding out corruption from the old regime, and we will have built the foundations for politically transforming Mexico.
In this context, the president also recognized the many challenges still left for his administration.
We still need to improve the health system. The economy needs to continue growing, and the levels of violence are the same we inherited from the last administration.
López Obrador added that his government will no longer tolerate corruption and will prioritize the less fortunate. He also talked about economic stability and the importance of good relations with neighboring countries. In terms of security, he detailed the work that the National Guard will be doing. This is a newly created body that started operations with 70,000 members, but has been questioned by many citizens.
The
National Guard is meant to be a civil organization with a military background. And as we all know, militarization in many countries, especially in Mexico, has implied a severe crisis and a setback in human rights. Those who supported López Obrador last year, with more than 53% of the vote, once again confirmed their support.
We don't want more bloodshed. We don't want more unemployment. We want justice. We don't want revenge. And yes, we want all corrupt politicians to face justice, as well as the businessmen who took part in the schemes.
People share the same optimism of President Obrador and say they are willing to continue building the so-called fourth transformation of their country.
A high-level meeting on migration, development, and food security in Mesoamerica is taking place in Mexico. The meeting is promoted by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Representatives from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, and Mexico are taking part. The summit will evaluate mechanisms to promote social development in rural areas, with the objective of reducing migration in the region. With this goal, Mexico has proposed other participating countries to design a joint strategy to face migration. Speaking during the summit, the Secretary General of the FAO, José Garciano de Silva, referred to the factors that generate forced migration in Central America.
The delay of rains ruined 70% of the year's first harvest, and then the excess of rain ruined almost half of the second harvest. As a consequence, more than 2 million people have seen their means of sustenance severely affected, and 1.4 million of them need food assistance. Migration also increases because illegal economic activities have become strongly in rural areas. This not only means that insecurity rises, but it is also negative for any investors to generate legal jobs.
But this summit comes on the heels of the U.S.'s plans to launch a series of immigration and customs enforcement raids, beginning after July 4th. This as Washington moves to detain and deport immigrant families in about 10 targeted cities across the United States. Our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Gestoso, has the details.
Muchas gracias. Mientras que el presidente Donald Trump anunció que
Well, President Donald Trump has announced that after the 4th of July massive raids will be taking place to deport undocumented migrants, the authorities will be mainly going after persons who already have a deportation order. Here throughout the day, there have been demonstrations all across the country against the treatment migrants are receiving in detention centers. On Monday, various Latin American congressmen visited some of these detention centers, and the reports are alarming. Immigrants are being held in unbelievable harsh conditions inside these U.S. government facilities, which have been likened to concentration camps. Detained immigrants have been subjected to humiliating and degrading conditions and treatment. They're forced to sleep on the floor. They sometimes receive no food, and the environment is unhygienic, to say the least. At the same time, we have learned that a group of Border Patrol agents have created a secret Facebook page where agents allegedly mocked migrant deaths, specifically the deaths of Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez and his 23-month-old daughter. This, while also sharing racist memes, mocking migrants, saying that if a migrant dies, it's not something they care about. The group has also shared crude memes of Congresswomen, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has strongly condemned abuse by U.S. authorities. 6 migrants detained at the border have died at the hands of U.S. authorities. Back to you.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, an oil tanker explosion in Nigeria has left dozens dead. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Brazil's current Minister of Justice, Sergio Moro, has attended a hearing in the lower house of Congress where he needed to explain recent leaks by The Intercept that allege that former President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva was put on trial without any actual evidence, and allegations that one of his key witnesses in his case perjured his testimony. Our correspondent in Brasilia, Andre Vieira, has more.
Former judge and current Justice Minister Sergio Moro is taking part in a hearing at the lower house of Congress. He will have to explain recent accusations published in The Intercept that revealed he worked together with the public ministry to sentence former President Lula da Silva without a fair trial. Lawmakers will also question the evidence that was used to sentence Lula, because on Sunday, The Intercept and Folha de São Paulo revealed that Sergio Moro, along with prosecutors, pressured a former member of construction company OAS to incriminate Lula da Silva without any evidence. Meanwhile, Lula's defense team continues searching for ways to annul his prison sentence.
Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit says that he plans to bow out as leader of the Dominica Labour Party after the general elections. He made the revelations during a political rally in Antigua and Barbuda, where he addressed Dominicans, some of whom moved there following the devastating effects of Hurricane Maria in 2017. Elections are constitutionally due by March next year, but many presume that it would be held by the end of this year as rallies rage on. Skerrit became the youngest head of government at the age of 31, surpassing Joseph Kabila of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
All of you.
SVG Air, the national airline of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, might be permanently providing flights between Grenada and one of its smaller islands called CARICOM. The 19-seater aircraft has been making frequent trips between the Lauriston Airport in CARICOM and the Maurice Bishop International Airport on the mainland. Minister for CARICOM and Petite Martinique Affairs, Kindra Martine Stewart, announced last month that the government would do what it could to facilitate the airline. The minister also underscored the enormous significance of the service between the islands and its link with St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The body that was found at Simpson Bay, St. Martin, over the weekend is that of a local and not either of the 2 U.S. tourists who went missing in Barbados last Monday. Barbados had been liaising with St. Martin to confirm the identity of the deceased, as the New Jersey residents Oscar Suarez and Magdalena Devel went missing. The pair got on a jet ski and never returned. Caribbean islands have since joined the search, with the Coast Guards of St. Lucia, Martinique, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines keeping an eye out along their coasts and around their islands. Protest leaders in Sudan have once again called for nationwide demonstrations to pile pressure on the ruling military council. The leaders announced a civil disobedience plan for July 14th, with strike action across all professional sectors, calling for the transition of power to civilian government. They added that on July 13th there will be a procession in commemoration of those killed thus far in demonstrations.
On Saturday 13 will be the March of the Meloni and this procession in the name of Arabaina massacre and the handover of civil authority in all regions of Sudan, in the capital and the region and villages of Sudan. And on Sunday 14 will be the day of civil disobedience and a comprehensive political strike in all professional sectors and popular, in the capital and regions, in conjunction with the procession outside Sudan.
At least 45 people were killed and over 100 were injured when an oil tanker exploded in central Nigeria. Authorities say that the tanker overturned and fell off the road as it was trying to avoid a pothole. People then rushed to gather the fuel from the tanker just before it exploded. Authorities expect the death toll to rise as many of those injured are in critical condition. After the break, thousands in Argentina and Chile witnessed a near-total solar eclipse. Join us again after this. Welcome back. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries has concluded a series of meetings in Vienna, Austria. The 24 countries that make up OPEC and non-OPEC group signed a historic cooperation agreement pledging to continue cutting oil production by 1.2 million barrels for 9 months. A further agreement was signed to ensure permanent dialogue between member countries in order to both monitor and defend the oil market. In doing so, OPEC sent a message to the world that through dialogue, collective objectives can be achieved while respecting national sovereignty. The group also confirmed the re-election of Nigerian Mohamed Barkindo as Secretary General for another 3 years.
It's about the stability. The signal of a further 9 months sends a message of the stability of this organization. This gives certainty to everyone, not just the oil's producers, but to consumers as well.
President Xi Jinping has welcomed his Turkish counterpart to China on a planned state visit after the G20 meeting in Japan. The Chinese president held a welcome ceremony for Turkish President Erdogan, and the two leaders held talks on the building of bilateral ties. Although political differences between Turkey and China remain, relations are improving and they're on course to expand economic cooperation. A judge in Italy has ordered the immediate release of the captain of the Sea-Watch migrant rescue ship. Carola Raquette was arrested after she steered her ship carrying 41 migrants from Africa through a naval blockade into the port of Lampedusa on Saturday. The Sea-Watch hit a police patrol boat on the way. The judge said Raquette had not broken the law because she was carrying out her duty to save lives. The Italian Interior Minister Matteo Salvini said he had hoped for a tougher response from the courts. And finally, thousands of people in Chile and Argentina are observing a near-total eclipse of the sun. The eclipse first became visible in the South Pacific and is expected to cover some 11,000 kilometers as it moves eastwards. The full eclipse can be seen for more than 4.5 minutes. That's considerably longer than the last such eclipse in 2017. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telestar-english.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telestar English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.